We are celebrating with our brothers and sisters and non-gender conforming individuals of the indigenous populations. And we have on the screen here, and we actually want to bring more folks on the screen. Right now, we're bringing in Nica, also known as JammedTomb on Twitch, a supporter of our show, and also speaking from the indigenous perspective. How are you this morning? Thank you so much for joining us.
What I said is hi, family, and all of you here. My name is Nica, or it's actually Nica, but most people say Nica because it's easier. Nica means bear. I'm also JammedTomb over here on Twitch. I do a lot of recycled art streaming, trying to teach people how to not throw just everything in the trash. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for hearing me speak.
Oh, no, the pleasure is ours. And we're also joined by today, the first day back, our brother Carl Mack, who I almost didn't recognize with your new facial hair, but we're glad to have you. And I know we're going to talk about that more on the Like It or Not. In the meantime, though, just the historical perspective, Brother Mack, the solidarity between that should exist and does exist between black people because of our system of survival in the face of this white supremacist system as it kind of juxtaposes with the fight of our indigenous brothers and sisters.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that's why BIPOC exists, right? Sorry.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And let us not forget the Underground Railroad, that all the stops were on reservations.
You know, and there's another voice. Let me jump in here because there's another voice, and we were getting prepared to bring our second guest on screen. And Dwayne, at any point when you're ready, I want to introduce our second guest into the conversation. We're also joined by LostSioux, an elder of the Dakota Sioux. And I just want to bring you into the conversation. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm Washington. Tanichilo Mia Chanchaga ni Toshpa. Papa Oyate Nitoshpa. In my language, that's saying good morning, how are you? My Indian name is Drum. Everyone calls me LostSioux because I stream and talk about all different indigenous issues going on today and in history, as well as I'm from the Dakota Nation. Which is part of the great Sioux Nation in so-called North America, I guess we could say. I say so-called because it's actually, we call it Turtle Island up here rather than, that's the original name before Columbus decided to name it after a pickle jar salesman.
Okay, we're getting
America
ready to go in. I love it.
America Vespucci, a pickle jar salesman, yeah.
Yeah, no, you I didn't see that one coming. You came out of, but that's the historical. That is absolutely the truth. We have so much brilliance right here in this conversation, Brother Mack. I was trying to bring you in, but we have our guests here. Talk about that overlap, and as JammedTomb said, that's why we have BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color, because of the commonality in our fights, Brother Mack.
Well, Ben, I would say this, given that we have these two distinguished guests on it, and they understand even more so than I, the relationship between how Native Americans, indigenous brothers and sisters help our particular people, I certainly like to hear their perspective more and sit at the feet of our brothers and sisters and learn. So, Sister Nica, Brother LostSioux, if you could just educate us on the way that indigenous brothers and sisters embraced us as a people and the support that you all gave us during those very trying and dark times in our history.
I wasn't sure that we were going to hit this topic, and it's just, this one's a long one that takes a lot to unpack, but essentially it's a lot, y'all, and I don't know that we actually have the time to unpack it, but indigenous people did take part in the Underground Railroad. And in order to protect our relatives that we took in, we were forced to take ownership of them, or some landowning person could come and take them.
Or we would marry
Google
them
my
in.
people, you couldn't marry them, and you had to own your husband or wife if you were living in the place that my people were from.
And many different tribes married them in, and when the soldiers and the slave hunters, now known as the law enforcement agency in this country, came for our Black African relatives, we like literally know their family. They're married into the tribe. You're coming for who? No. And we literally were like, no, if you want a war again, yeah, we'll go to war. But they're not leaving.
There's layers on layers of our interconnections in history, and how, I mean, honestly, the only reason they were able to enslave your ancestors is that they ambushed them and put them on ships for months to a foreign land. They tried to enslave us. They just found out that you can't enslave a people on their own land. We fought back, and had they not put you on ships and broke your ancestors down to nothing, skin and bones on those ships, they would have been able to fight too. This would have never happened. But they found out that they could not enslave people on their own continent, and so they went to another and they ambushed them and brought them here.
Can I just, Brother Mac, just real quick, because I just got to drop this and I want to throw it to you. We found that out in Afghanistan. We found that out in Vietnam, but I digress. Brother Mac.
Well, certainly let me say on behalf of our people, thank you all so much for the love and support and protection that you've shown us. Clearly, one of the names that comes up even before the Civil War situation was when Lewis and Clark were so-called exploring turtle or this, what we now call the North American continent. And there was a brother named York that accompanied them. And so one of the stories about York was that it was within the Indigenous tribe that, the darker the skin, they viewed it as bravery. And so York was embraced by Indigenous brothers and sisters. And that what helped in part secure Lewis and Clark's and their expedition across this country. I'm also reminded of James Beckwourth, who also came within the Native American community and was viewed with reverence and respect. So, on behalf of our people, because of the love and support and historical significance between our two people, I just want to say thank you so much for what you all did for us, how you supported us, and certainly want to know how we as a people today can support you all, our brothers and sisters in your trials and tribulations and challenges going on today.
One of the things I really want to quickly say, Brother Mac, it's an honor to meet you, and talk with you in person. But you kind of got a little mixed up there on the history with the buffalo. They purposely hunted down the buffalo to kill them off and put them into extinction to starve us onto reservations and underneath the foot and heel of the U.S. government and army. And by doing so, they literally almost wiped them out.
One of the quotes is, "Every buffalo dead is an Indian dead."
Thank you for that lesson. Thank you.
Well, these barbarians are really good at starving out populations. That's what they kind of specialize in throughout history. But I digress. Go ahead.
You're right, though. You're right. It is like they called us the savages and barbarians, but we are not the enemies that they claim we are. We have never been those enemies. Like when Columbus landed here and the Pilgrims and everything, even everywhere they went where Indigenous people are, they were treated with compassion and love and respect. Like even here, where Thanksgiving came from was from the Pilgrims that were here, were starving. They didn't know anything. They couldn't feed themselves. They couldn't work the land. They couldn't hunt. They didn't know anything. And they were eating themselves. And then we came along, one of the tribes came along and seen them, took pity on them, clothed them, fed them, showed them how to hunt, showed them how to farm, and also introduced them to soap. because at that time Europe was all about perfume wearing rather than bathing, because some priest had said that bathing was likened to sin and the devil. So I don't know where that came from, but some drunken moment, you know, and we have like the King Henry literally sat back and put out a royal proclamation of 1970 or 1876. I do believe correctly.
I think
73.
I think it was 73, but we could both be mixing that up.
It was around that time frame where he literally sat back after the French, Portuguese, and Spanish War that the English settlers started, because they wanted to go west of the Appalachian Mountains. And King Henry sat back and said, no, you're not going west of the Appalachians. You're to leave that alone. That's Indian country. That's Native country. Leave it alone.
That same proclamation said that chattel slavery would be abolished. The Tea Party had nothing to do with taxes.
The Tea Party had to do with the factor that they wanted to still own slaves, which they did. And they still do, because the 13th Amendment just switched it from chattel slavery from the cotton field owners to imprisonment by court. And and like we all know, right? Being put into prison equals prison slavery. It's slavery. So we see that constantly. And they're removing things that would make everything legit in anything that we do to stand up against it. They're constantly doing that because they want to. It's like a dying dinosaur. They want to continue on with this as long as they possibly can.
So Brother LostSioux and to Nica, what challenges today is it that most affects or most impacts our Native brothers and sisters today?
Poverty,
alcoholism, drug abuse,
despair, depression,
suicide,
being invisible all the time,
and
like being invisible everywhere all the time.
Literally, other than here, most places don't ever talk about missing Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited and other Indigenous people. They don't even mention it. It's not even on the news.
So you know, I lived in Seattle for 18 years and lived in Auburn, Washington, and one of the most lucrative casinos that happened there were with the Muckleshoot tribe. So, you know, tell me. So help me with that, because I've never understood.
So basically anything that we Indigenous people try to do and we do really well and get ourselves out of the poverty level and out of being so-called in the pockets or underneath the heel of the U.S. government, they automatically find a law to change that. The only thing that they've legally allowed us to do is gambling. Now, most reserves don't want gambling because we know full fact what goes on with that. And we don't want that. We want a healthier community.
Casinos are a survival technique because we understand that white people like to gamble, and so that they'll give us their money that way, because the rest of the money that we get from them sits in trusts and we get like 5 cents to the dollar of it. So we have to come up with creative ways to fund our people.
Yeah. And even that's not fully. Like even the casinos, we don't get fully money back. It's usually a chunk of it's going to whoever bankrolled or helped fund building it, right?
Okay, so again, I'm on the outside looking in, and there were a lot of stories that we heard about, and a lot of it had to do with the exorbitant amount of money that was coming in. And I'm gonna stick with the Muckleshoot Casino because I was very familiar with that. Went to that casino quite a bit, but it was said that the amount of money that was coming into that enabled the Muckleshoot people to now give X amount of dollars to every member of the tribe. So it was sold to us or told as though the lion's share of this funding was going to the Muckleshoot people, thus going to
that could be the case with the Muckleshoot people. All of us nations are separate. We're all different. We're not, there's not just one indigenous nation on Turtle Island. And again, Columbus was an idiot. Please don't use the term Indian. There are Indians. They're beautiful. They come from India. They have their own amazing, wonderful culture. We are native Turtle Islanders or indigenous, but we are not one nation. There are 2,500 nations.
Wow.
95% of us were wiped out. There were 2,500 nations. They estimate between 1 and 18 million of us were on this continent before Columbus came here. And they broke us down to 273,000 people.
Wow.
From 2,500 nations.
We're making
all of us are different. We're all very different. All of our nations are different. There is similarities and there's intersections in all of our indigeneity, but we are all very different. What one nation does for their survival may be completely different than what another nation does for their survival. So the casinos, I feel, they're an example of how we have to do things and how we had to conform to be able to survive at all. But it is not indicative of the greater experience of indigeneity, because not every nation has a casino.